What's doing, everybody? Welcome to the channel. Thank you for tuning in. If you've never been here before, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Everybody else, welcome back. Usually, for those of you that have never been here, I served 17 straight years in the prison system. So usually I'm talking about criminal cases, talking about the Department of Corrections, or trying to influence the youth to live in the positive and correct way. But today's a little different. Today I'm going to talk to you about the first time I took a serious beating in a fight. The first time, pardon the expression, that I got the living shit kicked out of me. Because one thing I was in my life was a fighter. I'm going to tell you how it started, why it started. I'll give you a brief insight into how I loved and fell in love with the nature of fighting. For many of you that have not followed the channel, unfortunately, when I was a kid, I was abused sexually at the age of 8 years old, the age of 9 years old, right around that area. And that caused desire in me psychologically to prove to the world I was a man, to prove to myself that I was a man. I had that need inside of me. But the problem was I didn't have a male role model or example. My parents were divorced and my father bounced. My grandfather had retired and moved to Florida, and I turned to the kids in the neighborhood, the older teenagers. And fortunately or unfortunately for me, I had the toughest guy in the entire neighborhood living directly across the street from me. He was a lifelong friend of mine, and he was a fighter. He was about 20 years old when I was 16 years old. And at this point, he was a Golden Gloves fighter. He was an undefeated Golden Gloves fighter. He was a bar fighter in the neighborhood. He was a really, really tough guy, and he was a small guy. He was 5'6", 150 pounds, 155 pounds. And he had blonde hair, blue eyes. He looked like a church boy. But he used to wreck everyone in the neighborhood, wreck them. It didn't matter if it was the bouncers, if it was big guys in the bars. And I grew up across the street from him. And so every day, this is what we would do together. We would sit on the front lawn and we would put on boxing gloves and we would box, we would wrestle, we would fight. I would wrestle them two at a time, him and his brother. And they made me a real tough kid, and I got into physical things in my life. I boxed, I wrestled, I played football, I ran, I was a runner. And even when I found myself doing drugs, even when I found myself getting high and getting into trouble, we would spend our time doing physical things. And a lot of it was fighting, and I watched him. Because I used to hang out with him all the time. I watched him in 100 fights, And so let's get into when I took my first beating, So in other words, what I'm trying to tell you is I grew up with this desire to prove myself, and I couldn't wait to get into a fight. I had been in fights in the juvenile detention centers already. I had been in fights in school, a couple of fights in junior high school. I was just a tough kid. But by the time I was 16, I wasn't big. Like, I'm only 5'6", 5'7" myself, but I was built like a little tank. If I could find any pictures, I'll include them in the video. But I was built like a little tank when I was 16 years old, and I was athletic. And this goes into the story of when I get into my first fight. And unfortunately, I catch a terrible, terrible beating in this one. I was 16. I was driving my mother's car, and it was about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was passing the bar, and I see my friend in front of the bar with his lips split open, blood pouring out of his face. He's older than me. He's 20 years old. He is the brother of the guy that I told you about, the fighter, the Golden Gloves fighter. And I get out of the car. Yo, what happened to you, man? What happened? He said, Sean hit me in the face with a pool ball inside of the bar. He says, go home, get my brother, and the house was only 2 houses away. So I race to the house. I run in the house, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is. I said, yo, your brother's at the bar. His lip is split open. I said, you got to come down there. And he jumps in the car and we shoot down to the bar. And he asks his brother, yo, who hit you? And his brother tells him, yo, Sean hit me in the face with a pool ball. He's inside of the bar. He's got his friends in there with him. And he tells me, leave the car running. He says, just leave the car running, wait outside. and he goes inside of the bar. Well, I want to see what's going to happen anyway. I want to see this. So I put the car in park and I go in behind him. By the time I get in the bar, there's one guy laying flat on his back already, twisted, because he just walked in the bar. He sees the guy that hit his brother drinking a beer at the bar, and he just takes him out while he's sitting there. Bang! He goes down, and when he knocks him out, the guy's friends get up. And so he turns around to run out of the bar because he don't want to fight three guys inside of the bar. And when he turns around to run out, he sees me standing there. He's like, "What are you doing?" He pushes me out the door. We all end up in the parking lot, And so now it's like a 3-on-3 fight because we have with the split lip, my boy with the split lip, and we have my other buddy, and I pick a guy. And the guy I pick, his name is Brian. And to make a long story short, I picked the wrong guy. I picked a guy who was about 28 years old. I was 16 at the time. This guy was like an all-state wrestler for a local college. Now he's in the bar drinking. He's got some drinks inside of him. He's 2, 3 times my size. And like I said, he's almost a 30-year-old man. He may have even been a little older than that. I picked a full-grown man who was an all-state fighter. And I'm a 16-year-old kid. And when I go in to get him, I think I'm a tough kid, 16 years old. The guy just crushes me in the side of the face. Boom! Hard shot. Puts me right down on the ground. And when I go to get up, he scoops me up. He lifts me in the air, turns me upside down on my head, and just slams me into the cement. And I am completely disorientated. But I'm not going to let him keep me down. I'm ready to fight. I want to fight, and I'm pushing myself up. And as I go to get up, he's having some mercy on me. The guy is having some mercy on me. I guess he realizes I'm a kid. I'm a 16-year-old kid. But then he crushes me in the side of the face again, and he is breaking me up. I'm talking about broken nose, busted mouth. And he gives me a few kicks. I'm covering up like this, but he gives me a few kicks to the side of the face. And I hear my friend saying, "Stay away from him, stay away from him," because he knows who he is. There's 40 bars in my town. There was 40 bars in a 5-mile radius, tough Irish and Italian guys. And we're going back to the 1980s, the late 1980s when guys were tough. They were fighting inside of the bars. And that's what we did. So anyway, this guy's giving me this beating. I end up grabbing his legs and pulling him down to the ground because I see his legs as I'm laying on the ground, and I pull him down to the ground, but I couldn't handle him. He was just too big for me. He was too strong for me. He was too experienced for me, and he was hurting me bad. And my friend had to come running over and knock him out. As my friend was running over, he was screaming, "Get off of him! He's a kid! He's a kid!" And boom, boom, my boy just took him out. And now we all jump in my car. The three of us jump in my car, and I'm hurting bad. I'm hurting. They put me in the passenger seat because I couldn't drive. And as we're driving, he says, "Joey, he was killing you, man. He was killing you." And I felt so great taking that beating. I said, "Yo, he couldn't." It was like a Rocky movie. I was like, "He couldn't keep me down, Rock. He couldn't keep me down." He couldn't keep me down. This guy was giving me the craziest beating. But I realized at that point, I says, "You can't hurt me." I said, "You can't hurt me." And my buddy looked at me and he was like, "It's true." He was like, "Yo, you took some beating, man." He says, "You're a really tough kid." And I said, "Let's go do it again. I want to go do it again. Let's go do it again." And I would do it every single weekend. That was the beginning of my addiction to fighting. I would sneak into the bars, and didn't look for I'm talking about 16, 17, 18 years old. I would sneak into the bars, and I wouldn't look for an easy fight. I wouldn't look for someone who was smaller than me. I looked for someone who was bigger than me. I wanted a challenge. I wanted to fight them 1, 2 at a time. I wanted to fight the bouncers. And what I learned from my buddy, because I used to see him knock out all these big guys, and I was like, "Yo, how do you knock them out?" And he taught me a lot. He sat me down after that beating, and he said, "Let me teach you something about fighting." He said, "First of all, don't ever be intimidated. I'll tell you something to my viewers. I'll tell you one way how to really win a fight. Not that I want you fighting, important, but I'm going to tell you how I won my fights. And it was because of something that I learned at the age of 16 years old. And I never forgot this. And it didn't matter if you were the most talented fighter or not. I trained every day for fighting. I hit the heavy bag every day. I hit the speed bag every day. I jumped rope every day as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. As I said, even if we got high, we would get high, smoke a joint, and then go right into the gym and work out. We were physical. We were very physical. We weren't sitting at home on computers like the kids these days. We were out, boxing, wrestling, running, fighting, jumping rope, hitting the bag, going to the gym. Even if we were drinking or smoking, we were, physical guys, man, physical guys. And these guys were older than me. And he told me, listen, Joey, the first thing is that people are intimidated by people with muscle. You see the big bounces, and usually younger people are intimidated by those bounces. He said the first thing you have to remember is that being big doesn't mean you know how to fight, right? Being big doesn't mean you can fight. That one thing has nothing to do with the other. Being big and being able to bench 300-400 pounds doesn't mean they know how to throw a correct punch. You see, 150-pound guy can knock out one of those big guys with one shot, because when you punch, it comes from the shoulder, right? When you punch, it comes from your hips. When you punch, it comes from the way you pivot, right? So there's a lot of technique involved, and that's what he started teaching me at a very young age: the technique on how to hit someone, on the spots where to hit them. You know what I mean? But more so than that, besides and having the endurance. A lot of those big guys didn't have the endurance. They didn't have the stamina. They didn't know how to fight. They intimidated people with their size. He said, forget that size. They're not too big to fight. He said, they're too big to miss. He said, you're a smaller guy. He said, they're not even going to be able to grab you. He said, you could hit them 5 times before they hit you once. Bang, 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 bang. He says, and they don't even know what hit them. He said, but here's the main key to winning a bar fight. He said, we're not talking about in the ring, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, this. We're talking about fighting in the bar. Here's the main thing. He said, once you realize you're going to be into a fight, once you realize there's going to be that physical altercation, he says, after you throw the first punch, he goes, throw that first punch as accurate and as hard as you can with everything you have. He said, but right after you throw the first punch, he said, number 2, it's got to be right behind number 1. So boom, boom. And after number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. He said, just don't stop. Go from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour. He says, in an instant. He said, just do a complete offensive attack on the person. He says, and most people are not prepared for that. He said, especially a big guy. He walks up to you with his hands down. Hey, what do you think you're going to do, you little mother baba? He says, then you just bang, 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 bang. He says, and you'll disorientate them real quick. He says they're going to go into defense. They're going to lose their offense because they're completely under attack. So they're going into defense. They're trying to protect themselves. He says as soon as you get the guy disorientated, grab him by the legs, pull him to the ground, and go to work on him. Bite his face. Use your elbows. Kick him in the face. Vicious, nasty. He said if you learn to fight like a pit bull, right from the beginning, from 0 to 100, he said the average guy isn't going to handle that. He said, they're not going to be able to take that. He says, a lot of these guys, he said, especially, they run their mouth. He says, and they don't have the endurance or the stamina. I had the endurance and the stamina. I was hitting the bag, working out, jogging, running, wrestling every single day at 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. I was taking some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was fighting. I was doing all that, right? And I got addicted to this fighting. I would end up going to the bars every Saturday, every Sunday, and I would lose some of them, right? And I loved it. I loved it. It was so addicting. It was such a rush. And what I really liked about it is that they were big guys too, and I was a little guy, and I didn't just pick people to beat up. Don't get me wrong. And I don't say this to sound like the better guy. I was picking the guys in the bars that thought they were tough guys. You know what I mean? The guys in the bar that were abusing people verbally or acting like they were king shit because they were these big, huge dudes. And they used to look at me like a little guy. And I was like, I'm going to wreck them. You know what I mean? I'm gonna wreck this dude. And all of a sudden they were under attack. It was the bouncers when they were nasty to you. I would tell the guy one time, listen, yo, you're gonna get hurt. Yeah, well, bing, 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 bing. And then they were done. So yeah, this would cause me to get into dozens upon. I'd go to the bar every Saturday and every Sunday looking for a fight. And I became addicted to it. It was a rush. It was a rush. And so this was a mistake that the guys made in the prison system when I would end up going into prison, because they looked at me like this little dude. As I said, I was only 5'6", 5'7", pushing my luck. But I was built, I was strong, and they looked at me like, what's this little what's this little white guy gonna do from Long Island? They thought it was gonna be easy. They didn't realize that I love to fight. My whole life, I love to fight, and I would try and walk away from the fights in prison, and they're so ignorant that they think you're walking away because you're a sucker. They think you're walking away because you're scared. They think you're walking away because you can't fight. I was trying to walk away because, number one, I didn't want to get in trouble in the prison system. I didn't want to get more time added to my sentence. I didn't want to go to solitary confinement. And the truth is, I didn't want to hurt anyone because I was trying to change my life, right? But these guys would push it. You know what I mean? And one thing about prison is a lot of them in prison, the guys run their mouth. Like there's an old saying, they're all bark and no bite. And so once I realized there was going to be a fight as they're running their mouth, I would just all of a sudden catch them, boom, and then I would give them such a beating. That they would eventually point the finger at me, and they were like, yo, you see that white guy over there? Yeah. They said, stay far away from him, man. They said, he's a nasty, nasty fighter. And as I said, there's no rules in fighting with me. There's no rules in fight. No rules at all. You know what I mean? I'll bite your nose off. I'll rip your ears off. I'm getting nasty. It's elbows and ankles. I mean, elbows and heels and fists and headbutts and biting and ripping. I'm, turned into a pit bull. But I'm retired these days now. I'm retired. All right. I'm a good man. But I figured I would tell you the story about the first time I took a beating. The first time I took a beating was at the hands of Brian. Brian kicked the living shit out of me when I was 16 years old. But he made me fall in love with fighting. And I didn't stop until I got old and had to retire. I'll see you guys later, man. Have a good one.